Yo guys, what is up? Mox in our Borderlands 4 video, and today we finally get to talk about Harlowe. I flew all the way to Germany to play Harlowe and get this video and footage for y'all. I now have a bunch of time on her. I played her at like early game, at like level 5, and also in the vaults. We couldn't respec her like skill tree in the vaults, so that's why I wanted to play her at like level 5, so I could mess around with her different skill trees. But Harlowe is awesome. This video, we're going to be kind of breaking down her different skill trees, her abilities, her trait, and more, and also kind of give you guys some impressions and how she just like feels to play. So I hope you guys enjoy the breakdown. If you appreciate me flying all the way to Germany to bring this video to y'all, I really do appreciate you guys dropping like a like and dropping a comment on the video. It helps me out a ton. All right, guys, let's do this. So the first thing to talk about is Harlowe's Entanglement. This is her unique Vault Hunter trait, and a lot of her skill trees will revolve around this, so understanding it is pretty important. So basically, whenever Harlowe uses her action skill on enemies, those enemies become entangled, and entangled enemies share a portion of all gun damage and skill damage with all other entangled enemies. So if you only have one entangled enemy, by default, you're not dealing like any extra damage, but as soon as you have two enemies entangled, it doesn't matter how far apart they are. If they are entangled, they will share the damage that you're dealing to them. Now, by default, this is a 7% of damage dealt, and it lasts 12 seconds, but there are points in her skill tree that you can up this to, like, I believe 32% of your damage dealt, but kind of as this goes, a lot of the times you'll notice that if you have enemies entangled, you're shooting at them, at least at its base value. You'd shoot at one enemy, and the time you'd turn to another enemy, it would be around like half health or 3/4 health. You're going to be constantly, whenever you're fighting in large crowds, everything is going to be getting weaker. And one thing that I really noticed was exceptionally strong on Harlowe was Jacob's weapons, because Jacob's weapons on crit will deal a bunch of damage, but they'll ricochet. And for example, normally the enemy that gets hit by the ricochet would be the only one taking damage. But now, anytime that you're ricocheting, you're dealing extra damage to other enemies. And the more ricochets, the more like damage on top of each other you'd be constantly getting, because that damage is basically looping with Jacobs, and that felt really good to use on her. I was expecting just to be using Maliwan weapons, but I think towards like endgame, like Maliwan elemental weapons with Jacobs parts to roll crits is going to be a really strong synergy on her. For action skills, Harlowe's green action skill is Flux Generator. She throws her Flux Generator in front of her, which projects an energy field dealing cryo damage over time and entangling enemies. Allies inside the energy field gain overshield, and then you can press F to pick up your Flux Generator and toss it again. This was like a pretty big duration focus thing where you'd place it down and all of the enemies in the vicinity would become entangled and get like slowed, and then you could kill them. And then you don't even need to like look at it. You could just run away, and then if you get to another pack of enemies, you'd hit the F button and it would recall, and then you could throw it down again. So like I was sometimes placing this up to like 3 groups of enemies to basically put it down and entangle them. This was a pretty big AoE by default. There's things to make it bigger, but any enemy that's in this field is going to be taking a bunch of damage. They're going to be slowed by the like cryo damage, and then they're also going to be damage sharing against them. Her next action skill is called 0 Point. You press F to use Harlowe's Halo Accelerator to place an enemy in stasis. This is kind of like a phase lock. Enemies immune to stasis take damage instead. You can use the button again to cause the enemy in stasis to be slammed into the ground in the direction Harlowe is facing, and it creates a small explosion. Retriggering stasis has a cooldown. So basically what this does is you like phase lock an enemy, and while they're phase locked, they're kind of like drifting a little bit. Like they're not completely locked in place. So they're not like, phase locked to where you'd be hitting like a sniper shot every single time. But you can slam them down in whatever way that you're looking at. So for example, you can have this enemy in this bubble, and then if you look at another enemy and press the button again, it'll send this orb of the enemy flying at the other enemy, and it'll slam them together, and then both of them take damage, and then both of them will become entangled. And you can kind of use this as like a ping pong ball to just constantly slam it into other enemies. So you can, for example, if it was like an elite, just keep that enemy in stasis and shoot at them like you would a phase lock, but you can also use it as kind of a ball of destruction. Kind of think Amara's phase flare, but it handles like way better. And lastly, we've got Harlowe's Chroma Accelerator. This one is wild. So you basically press or you fire an unstable energy pocket from Harlowe's Chroma Accelerator. The unstable energy pocket passes through enemies and deals cryo damage to all enemies it passes near. You can press F to cause the unstable energy pocket to explode, dealing heavy radiation damage in a large area. This is like quite literally a portable nuke. You shoot this thing out and you let it, like, it slowly travels, so you let it pass through enemies. All of the enemies it passes through, it'll become entangled. And then once it gets to its like target location or in the vicinity of enemies, you can then press it again to detonate it. So if it hits like a wall, for example, it will detonate. But you can also detonate it if you're shooting it kind of like into the air or like passing through enemies and then do a massive explosion. And I was talking to one of the Gearbox devs, and he said that his favorite thing on Harlowe to do is use the like gravity augment, which turns this thing into a massive gravity ball that will suck all the enemies in, and then you just detonate them with the nuke explosion. And it actually did quite a lot of damage. All right, now let's do her skill tree. We're starting in blue. This is her like phase lock skill tree with quantum immortality. Whenever Harlowe entangles an enemy, she gains health regen. This is percentage based. Parallel circuit. After triggering or re-triggering an action skill, Harlowe gains increased gun damage, which stacks. Pulse drive. Harlowe gains increased action skill cooldown rate. Make extraordinary. Harlowe gains critical hit chance with all skills. This chance increases every time Harlowe entangles an enemy. This effect stacks. This is very, very nice, just stacking crit chance. Periodic table flip. Harlowe gains increased elemental damage, status effect application chance, and cryo effectiveness. Harlowe has a very strong focus on cryo and radiation in like a bunch of her trees. Peer review. Whenever an enemy enters stasis, spawn a homing rejuvenating projectile that targets Harlowe or her allies. Once the enemy is slammed, killed, or stasis ends, the rejuvenated projectile grants decreased action skill duration rate and increased action skill cooldown rate for a duration. If the target is in fight for your life, they immediately gain second wind. So this basically gives Harlowe's Maya's res, which is very cool to see return. You could just like stasis your buddy and get them up. Negative entropy. Harlowe gains increased gun handling. This bonus is doubled while an enemy is in stasis. Strange attractor. Whenever Harlowe shoots an enemy with a gun, bullets ricochet off of that enemy onto all enemies in stasis. If Harlowe critically hits an enemy, that enemy becomes entangled. So like, this is just kind of starting off, talking about how strong Jacob's weapons are going to be on her. This gives you inherent ricochets on all of your shots. You shoot an enemy with a gun, your bullets ricochet off of that enemy into all enemies in stasis. So this, you stasis a few enemies, and then you're guaranteeing ricocheting on all of your shots, and if you're critically hitting them with Jacobs, then you're getting even more ricochets, right? And all those enemies are going to be becoming entangled, so all of them are going to be damage sharing. Bright future. Whenever Harlowe re-triggers, or triggers or re-triggers an action skill, she gains increased fire rate. Ripple effect. Kill skill. Whenever Harlowe kills an entangled enemy, automatically entangle another nearby enemy. This is so nice. It'll basically give you sharing of your entangled enemies. As long as you have a enemy entangled, it'll share to the next one, right? So when you kill that enemy, another enemy will get seeked and entangled, meaning that like you use your action skill, you could probably just be fighting entangled enemies until your action skill is back up, because that'll keep transferring over entangled enemies. Harlowe gains increased critical hit damage. Whenever Harlowe deals cryo damage, she gains increased action skill cooldown rate, and Harlowe gains increased cryo damage. On the right side of Blue Tree, we've got Indiscreet Math. Harlowe gains increased splash damage. Inertia. Whenever an enemy Harlowe has in stasis dies, a new enemy is automatically added to stasis. When this happens, Harlowe's action skill duration resets. However, it drains quicker. So this would be kind of I forget the name of it, but like on Maya, where you'd constantly have this like phase lock going between back and forth and enemies. Sounds kind of like that. Experimentation, kill skill, killing an entangled enemy causes an elemental explosion on all other entangled enemies. That one sounds really cool. Sustained reaction, kill skill, killing an entangled enemy restores a portion of Harlow's action skill duration, so you can keep it up. Whenever Harlowe deals splash damage to an entangled enemy, she gains a chance to trigger entangled damage share again. Though that looks like a 45% chance whenever you're dealing splash damage to just have that damage occur again through entangle. Ground state, every time Harlowe slams an enemy, gain increased slam damage and slam damage radius. Enemies in stasis take decreased damage. That's 45% extra slam damage. And then Gordian Knot. Kill skill, whenever Harlowe kills an entangled enemy, she gains a chance to instantly fully restore her action skill. That looks like it would stack up to 35% chance whenever you kill an entangled enemy, just get your action skill back. That's kind of nuts. Next in the middle tree, we've got Keep Ice on that. All cryo damage Harlowe deals gains lifesteal. If Harlowe's health is full, she gains overshield instead. So basically, you just get cryo, lifesteal, and everything. Cold storage, all damage dealt to enemies in stasis is stored. Whenever an enemy is slammed or stasis ends, create a cryo explosion based on all stored damage, centered on that enemy, and also automatically freezes other enemies nearby. That's pretty cool. So basically, you you hold up an enemy and then you shoot as much as you can into them. And then if you kill them or slam them, it creates a cryo explosion based off of all of that damage. So you shoot your whole mag into an enemy, you slam them, and then all of the enemies nearby will take the damage of the slam, but also as if they got hit by a full mag of damage. That's really, really cool. I like that. Unstable Isotope. Kill skill Harlowe deals bonus cryo damage with all sources. Wow, that's nuts. On kill skill. So like your grenades, your action skill, your guns, everything just gets bonus cryo damage. Whenever Harlowe freezes an enemy, create an endothermic aura that deals constant cryo damage to enemies around it. Harlowe's endothermic aura deals increased damage based on her overshield. The more full, the greater the bonus. Whenever Harlowe deals cryo damage with an action skill, she gains a chance to freeze that enemy. Whenever Harlowe freezes an enemy, she gains increased action skill cooldown rate. Whenever Harlowe slams an enemy, create a singularity on that enemy followed by a cryo explosion. So this would, as you're like slamming, you can pull more enemies in to just hit more enemies with the slams. And then whenever Harlowe deals non-cryo damage to an entangled enemy, she deals bonus cryo damage to that enemy. If she deals cryo damage to an entangled enemy, she deals increased bonus damage. Okay, that's pretty nuts. 1 point, you get 30% bonus cryo damage if you're using cryo. And the other thing was like 35% bonus cryo? So you've got like 65% bonus cryo damage, if I'm not mistaken, just stacking up on enemies. Next, we've got Force of Will. Whenever Harlowe critically hits an enemy, daze that enemy. Oh, cool. They're bringing back daze. Have we seen daze since Maya? That's cool. I remember daze was like a big part of Lilith's kit. Whenever Harlowe critically hits an enemy, daze that enemy. Dazed enemies have decreased movement speed and attack speed. Daze can stack. Wildcat destabilization. Entangled enemies take bonus radiation damage from Entangle. Whenever Harlowe deals radiation gun damage to an enemy, restore action skill duration. Whenever Harlowe kills an enemy in stasis, create a radiation nova. The radiation nova deals damage based on remaining action skill duration. Interesting. Harlowe gains increased action skill duration for every entangled enemy. Cool. Killing an enemy restores a portion of Harlow's action skill cooldown and action skill duration. Okay, this tree seems very like keep up your action skill at all times focused. Harlow's gun deals bonus cryo damage for every enemy she has in stasis. Man, she's going to stack up so much bonus cryo damage. Falling bodies, place an additional enemy in stasis at the cost of action skill duration. Oh, you can put 2 people. When stasis ends, automatically slam all enemies straight down. Slingshot, whenever Harlowe dazes an enemy, she also entangles them, and then she gains increased movement speed. That's pretty nice. It looks like it'd stack up to 40% movement speed. And stun lock. Whenever Harlowe critical hits an enemy, she briefly puts that enemy in stasis. This form of stasis lasts for a short duration or until the enemy is shot again. Wait, that's nuts. Okay, there is a cooldown on it, so the cooldown prevents that from being absolutely broken. But whenever you crit an enemy, you put them in stasis. That is pretty wild. So you'd be putting enemies in stasis even when your action skill isn't up. So once again, some crazy Jacob synergies, but it does look like the cooldown on that would prevent that from being like absolutely busted. Next up, we've got her Green Tree Cosmic Brilliance, and her first passive is Main Hum. Harlowe gains increased maximum shield capacity and maximum overshield capacity. Personal observation, Harlowe deals increased melee damage, and her melee attacks have a chance to entangle enemies. The melee damage is a little weird here, because like I just don't see her as a melee character, but melee entanglement does seem pretty nice. The kicker here would be potentially using like a fish slap or any like alternative source of melee to entangle enemies. Could be really neat. Action at a distance. Whenever Harlowe applies a status effect to an enemy, she gains a chance to apply that status effect to each entangled enemy. That seems pretty nice. Momentum. Whenever Harlowe entangles an enemy, she and her allies deal increased critical hit damage. Heat Death. Harlowe gains increased cryo efficiency. Cryo efficiency is basically the amount of damage that you need to deal to them to be able to freeze them. Blue Giant. Harlowe's Flux Generator gains increased radius. Additionally, whenever she re-triggers Flux Generator, she creates a cryo hazard where her Flux Generator was located and a radiation hazard wherever she next places her Flux Generator. Only one of these hazards may be active at a time. Neutron Decay. Whenever Harlowe irradiates an enemy, she gains increased gun damage. This effect can stack. That looks pretty nice. You can get 5 stacks, and it looks like you'd get 10% gun damage at max per. Enemies inside Harlowe's Flux Generator lose all elemental resistances. Harlowe and her allies inside her Flux Generator gain increased status effect chance, with their status effect chance going up to plus 100%. This seems pretty nutty to me for a few reasons. The first is elemental resistance is going to be seeming like more and more of an important thing and potentially something that enemies are going to have at endgame. So just getting rid of all of their resistance is really nice. But I'd be very curious if this eliminates the inherent penalties that you have for not matching elements. So, for example, if an enemy's in this Flux Generator, if you would deal 100% damage to enemies that are like armored with shock damage. If that's the case, this would be really, really powerful. In addition to giving you 100% status effect chance, and the thing with the enemies like sharing status effects, where you'd basically just be instantly freezing things, could be really, really cool. Mass Function. Harlowe and her allies gain increased reload speed for every entangled enemy. Creative Overflow. Harlowe deals increased gun damage based on her overshield. The more overshield she has, the bigger the bonus. Resonance Cascade. Whenever Harlowe deals radiation damage to an enemy, she gains increased action skill damage. This effect can stack. Whenever Harlowe shoots an entangled enemy, she and all allies restore a portion of their action skill cooldown. You get action skill cooldown just for shooting things? That's cool. Easy enough. Whenever Harlowe freezes an enemy, she receives a stack of 0 point. For every stack of 0 point, her action skill duration freezes for a short time. That is very cool, and you can get 5 stacks of that, or put 5 points into that. So anytime that you're freezing enemies, your action skill just stops draining, and then you're constantly freezing things because you got that 100% status effect chance, status effect spreading, and more cryo efficiency. Excited State. Harlowe gains increased critical hit damage. Whenever an enemy is damaged by Harlowe's action skill, the next shot on that enemy will be an automatic critical hit. Perpetual Engine. When Harlowe activates her Flux Generator, she gains damage reduction and increased action skill duration for each entangled enemy and each additional enemy she entangles while her action skill is active. That is 7% DR per enemy. Nice. Refraction. Harlowe and her allies gain ricochet chance against entangled enemies. Critical hits double this chance. Ricochets have reduced damage. Nice. So you're just going to be ricocheting against enemies, but critical hits double that chance. Once again, like the synergies with Jacob's weapons with her is going to be crazy. Accretion. Harlowe and her allies gain lifesteal against entangled enemies. Nice. Distribution function. Whenever Harlow's action skill damages an enemy, restore a portion of her and all allies' shield capacity. If their shields are full, gain overshield. Harlow's flux generator occasionally throws grenades. If Harlowe or her allies are inside the flux generator and have a grenade equipped, it throws a copy of that grenade. That's pretty neat, but it's also kind of like one of her only synergies I've seen with Ordnance. Group study. Harlowe spawns a Halo sidekick for each ally instead of her flux generator. Halo sidekicks automatically fly to each ally and hover near them, granting increased gun damage, fire rate, and reload speed. Action skill retrigger. Overload Harlow's Halo sidekick to increase their effects. This effect stacks. While overloaded, Harlow's action skill duration drains faster. That's cool. She's got quite a bit of I think she's the only Vault Hunter that we've seen that has things that are specifically team focused, but that is 25% gun damage and 20% fire rate per activation, and she can activate it multiple times. You're potentially stacking 75% gun damage and 60% fire rate just by retriggering it 3 times, which is fairly reasonable to do. And then pencils down. While Harlow's action skill is cooling down, she grants herself and her allies increased reload speed and fire rate. In the middle, we've got Harlow's certainty principle. Harlowe gains increased gun handling, which is further increased with every enemy in flux generator. While Harlowe and her allies are inside the flux generator's radius, they deal bonus cryo damage. Whenever Harlowe and her allies leave the flux generator radius, they instead deal bonus radiation damage. Whenever Harlowe inflicts cryo or radiation status effect, that enemy becomes entangled. That is really cool. That second line is potentially insane because it's separate from the first part. If that means that, regardless of if your action skill is up or not, if you hit an enemy with cryo or radiation, they get entangled. That would be really, really strong, especially if you're on a Jacob's weapon that's ricocheting that is cryo or radiation. Whenever Harlowe retriggers her action skill, the next shot fired from her gun drains her shield and deals bonus radiation damage based on the amount drained. Press and hold your melee button to make Harlowe swap places with her flux generator. That's pretty cool. Whenever Harlowe critically hits an enemy, she gains a chance to entangle it and refill a portion of her gun magazine. Dang. Okay, that's a really good skill. I like that. It's interesting, too, because the one above that skill was the gun handling, which I would never take, but it looks like you probably have to put 1 point into there, and then you can go take that other node. Harlowe's critical hits with guns deal bonus radiation damage. Violent Horizon. Harlowe's flux generator occasionally shoots radiation projectiles at nearby enemies outside of its radius. If these projectiles radiate an enemy, the flux generator then drags them within its radius. Retriggering flux generator creates a singularity burst that drags in nearby enemies. That's really cool. So this tree's got a bunch of ricochets and entangling things, and it's also just going to make this massive singularity that'll pull in enemies. And then Exposed Core. While her shield is down, Harlowe gains increased status effect chance. For the left side, we've got Decoherence. Harlowe deals increased damage with all sources to entangled enemies. Enemies inside of her flux generator take further increased damage. Unified Theory. Harlowe's flux generator gains increased action skill damage. This effect is increased based on how many allies and enemies are inside of her flux generator. That's 10% per ally and enemy in the radius. Blue Shift. While her action skill is cooling down, Harlowe deals bonus cryo damage with her melee attacks. While her action skill is active, she deals bonus radiation damage with her melee attacks. Interesting. More melee stuff. Harlowe deals bonus damage with guns, melee attacks, and action skills while she has overshield. The more overshield she has, the bigger the bonus. Whenever Harlowe entangles an enemy, she gains increased action skill damage, duration, and cooldown rate. This effect stacks. Potential Transference Charge skill. Whenever Harlowe relocates her flux generator, it teleports to a location in her crosshairs, consuming a charge and creating a shock burst that deals shock damage to enemies inside it, which grants free second wind to allies and heals all allies with the flux generator. Harlowe gains increased status effect chance. Whenever Harlowe applies a status effect to an enemy, it becomes entangled. Dang. Anytime you apply a status effect to an enemy, it becomes entangled. I like that a lot. And lastly, for her red tree, we've got Cyclotron. Harlowe gains increased fire rate. Harlowe gains increased magazine or maximum shield capacity and shield recharge rate. Harlowe gains increased status effect chance. And Harlowe gains increased action skill damage. Elementary, Harlowe gains increased elemental damage and status effect damage. Neutron capture, all damage Harlow's unstable energy pocket deals to enemies is stored. Whenever it explodes, a portion of that is stored damage is transferred to Harlow's gun, causing her to deal bonus radiation damage. By the way, this red tree is the nuke tree where she shoots out the massive radiation explosion. Void Star, whenever Harlow's unstable energy pocket passes by an enemy, it loses a portion of its current total health and becomes frozen. That's neat. It just does 30% of their health and guarantees freezes them. Bleeding Edge, Harlowe gains increased reload speed. Test subjects, whenever Harlowe applies a status effect to an enemy, she gains increased action skill cooldown rate. Get Up and Go, whenever Harlowe activates or re-triggers an action skill, she gains increased movement speed. Elephant's Foot, whenever Harlow's shield breaks, she deals radiation damage to all entangled enemies. Harlowe gains overshield equal to the amount of damage dealt this way. Harlowe gains increased status effect duration, and Harlowe gains increased radiation damage. On the right side of the tree, we've got highly efficient. Kill skill. Whenever Harlowe kills an enemy with a skill, restore a portion of her shield capacity. Containment Breach. Whenever Harlow's unstable energy pocket detonates, it splits into several smaller, fast-moving, unstable energy pockets. Mechanical Brilliance. Whenever Harlowe damages an enemy with a skill, she gains increased skill damage. This affects stacks. For every enemy, her action skill damage, Harlowe gains increased gun damage with her when her action skill ends. Whenever Harlowe enters Fight for Your Life, she throws a free unstable energy pocket at a nearby enemy if there are any. Nice. That's cool. Whenever Harlowe activates Chroma Accelerator, drain her shield and amp her next unstable energy pocket. Charge skill. Chroma Accelerator gains charges as Harlowe keeps it readied for the duration of Chroma Accelerator or until all charges are used. Holding F ends the shattering light early and refunds a portion of the cooldown for every charge remaining. So you gain charges and you can hold it and then you can end it early, refunds a portion of the cooldown. Interesting. Sounds like you could basically use it more than once. Instead of having one shot that is like a bunch of damage, you can kind of constantly send out shots. Melee Override. Harlowe attaches an unstable energy pocket to her fist and slams it into an enemy in front of her. That's pretty fun. Glow Up. Harlowe gains critical hit chance with guns against irradiated enemies. That's 25% crit chance if enemies are radiated. Special Purpose Magnets. Harlow's unstable energy pocket pulls enemies along as it passes by, and its detonation deals increased damage for every enemy it has already in it. This is the gravity one that pulls in all the enemies. That seems very good for a big nuke. Poison Sun. Harlowe gains increased radiation damage and irradiation chance. Whenever Harlowe damages an irradiated enemy or an entangled enemy, shoot a radiation dart at another enemy. That's got a 2-second cooldown. Harlowe deals bonus radiation damage to entangled enemies. That'll go up to 18% bonus radiation damage to entangled enemies. Whenever Harlowe irradiates an enemy, create a radiation explosion on that enemy. The damage is 40% of your total irradiated damage. That's pretty sick. Also, it's got the text Tront on it. So you've got in her tree, you've got a bunch of status effect chance, radiation damage, radiation duration and all that. Obviously, duration would be increasing the total of this explosion, but you should just be able to get constant radiation explosions happening all the time on enemies, which sounds really neat. And this is also in the tree that groups enemies with your thing. So you can group them up and have big radiation explosions going on. Let's see how this ties together. Demon Core. Harlow's unstable energy pocket travels, or as her energy pocket travels, it shoots radiation darts at enemies. Whenever Harlowe entangles an enemy with her action skill active, automatically irradiate that enemy, so more guaranteed explosions. Kill skill. Killing an irradiated enemy or killing an enemy with radiation damage leaves behind a radiation hazard. So hazards are ground dots. So all of your explosions, all of these things are also going to be leaving constant stacking radiation hazards on the ground. That is very cool. That middle tree sounds very fun. Now for left, Carry the One. Whenever Harlowe entangles an enemy, she gains a chance to entangle another nearby enemy. That's freaking sick. That's a 50% chance to entangle nearby enemies. Field research, whenever Harlowe kills an enemy with her unstable energy pocket, and when she kills an entangled enemy while her unstable energy pocket is active, refund a portion of her next action skill cooldown. So she's just going to be able to use her action skill more often, because if you're killing enemies, you're going to be refunding that. Potentially, you could get a full refund on a good shot. Harlowe gains increased skill damage. Harlowe gains lifesteal against frozen enemies. If she's at full health, she gains overshield instead. Convert all chroma accelerator damage to cryo damage. Harlow's unstable energy pocket bounces as it travels and can no longer be manually detonated. Each time it bounces, it creates a radiation explosion. Whenever it strikes an enemy, it changes direction and bounces towards another enemy. So this says it does a radiation damage explosion, but I'd imagine if you grab the thing above that converts everything of this to cryo, I'd imagine it does cryo. So like you could have it be doing cryo or radiation. Whenever Harlowe freezes an enemy, she gains increased action skill cooldown rate. This effect can stack. And whenever Harlowe freezes an entangled enemy, it deals cryo damage to itself and all other entangled enemies. Guys, that is going to do it for the Harlowe breakdown. Let me know what you think of her. She seems to have a lot of synergies with cryo and radiation damage. I think her like mobbing potential is going to be really, really strong. I would be shocked if she isn't like one of the strongest, if not the strongest, like mobbing characters in the game. However, it does look like she doesn't have anything that specifically focuses her on boss killing. So I think she is going to be like pretty similar to Amara in that sense, where like she's really good at mobbing and killing like waves and groups of enemies, but not quite as strong as the other Vault Hunters at killing bosses. So we'll see. But I hope you guys enjoyed the breakdown. I will catch you all in the next one. I got a bunch more videos on the way. Take care. Peace.